possibility. I don't know if you've seen or read or
who said that?
You said that.
Oh, good. I say so damn many things that you have to kind of...
You said that about a year and a half ago.
Oh, where was I when I said that?
It was right before the election.
I see. Where were you? I always like to establish the predicate here.
Took a long time there. Where were you? Thanks for inviting us into your home tonight. That's it for this special report. Fair, balanced, and unafraid. The story, hosted by Martha MacCallum, up in New York, starts right now. Hi, Martha.
Thanks a lot, Brett. Good to see you tonight. So, wow, breaking tonight, we've got some brand new details that have just come through on the harrowing moments 30,000 feet up today that led to the first death on a U.S. aircraft in nearly 10 years. Good evening, everybody. I'm Martha MacCallum, and this is the story. An engine explodes midair on Southwest Flight 1380, sending shrapnel through the window. The pressure of that nearly pulling a passenger out of the plane in midair. Passengers on board live streaming on Facebook as all of this happened, one sharing this footage with us, along with a post that read, "Something is wrong with our plane. It appears we are going down." Another passenger, Joe Marcus, tweeting, "What a flight. Made it, still here." Joe joins me on set in just a moment. But first, let's go to Trace Gallagher in our West Coast newsroom with the late-breaking details tonight on the pilot and the rest of this amazing story. Trace.
You know, Martha, Southwest 1380 was about 30 minutes into a flight from New York's LaGuardia Airport to Love Field in Dallas. At 30,000 feet, the left engine broke apart. The engine casings are designed to prevent any metal from flying out, but in this case, the failure was uncontained, and the debris damaged the fuselage and pierced the window of row 17. The plane immediately lost pressure, and the oxygen masks were deployed. A woman who reportedly was sitting near the window of row 17 was struck by metal, and passengers say her body was partially sucked toward the opening. She was pulled back by those sitting near her, but witnesses say her injuries were simply too extensive and she later died. Listen to one of the pilots explaining the engine failure to air traffic control.
Engine severe damage, engine failure, and exact tons of fuel. Part of the aircraft issues, so we're going to need to slow down a bit. Could you have the medical meet us there on the runway as well? We've got injured passengers. So it's not on fire, but part of it's missing.
We should note that female pilot, her name is Tammy Jo Schultz, and she is now being hailed as a hero, and it's notable that she was one of the first female fighter pilots in the military. Radar goes on to show the plane went from 30,000 feet to under 10,000 feet in 5 minutes. That's mostly because oxygen is no longer required under 10,000 feet, but passengers say it felt like the plane was free-falling, saying the cabin was in chaos, and even some flight attendants were crying. One soon-to-be father thought this was it. Watch.
I have, my wife is in her 3rd trimester with our first child, so I spent a lot of my time trying to articulate what I wanted my final words to be to my unborn child, to my wife, to my parents.
Those on board say the plane made a very hard landing, but overall the crew did a phenomenal job. The captain has been with Southwest Airlines for 24 years. The engine in question is made jointly by General Electric and a French manufacturer. And in 2016, the same left engine on the same type of Southwest 737 also broke apart in flight, and the damage appears to be almost identical. You see it there. In the 2016 case, investigators say a fan blade snapped because of metal fatigue, and the FAA at the time issued a directive for airlines to check those types of engines, which are on about 6,500 737s worldwide. And Martha, you mentioned this is the first death in 9 years on a U.S. airline. It is also the first death ever aboard a Southwest Airlines plane. Martha.
Trace, thank you very much. Joining me now here on set with his firsthand account, a passenger from Southwest Flight 1380, Joe Marcus. Joe, how are you doing?
Doing good, hanging in there. Crazy day.
I mean, I guarantee you, when you woke up this morning, you did not think that you were going to be sitting here tonight after this. And it is, it's tragic. This woman lost her life on this flight. 7 people are injured. Describe for us what it was like for you. Where were you sitting? Were you traveling alone?
So yeah, I was traveling alone to Dallas to visit my sister who lives out there. And I got a pretty good seat right by the window. And kind of mid-flight, I hear a big boom. Look to my left, the engine's totally just black. People screaming.
So you could see the engine from where you were sitting?
From where my seat was, because I got a nice window seat.
Did you see this woman who was partially sucked out of the...
No, I heard a big explosion behind me. There's a couple rows back.
Okay.
So I was just trying to, keep everyone calm in my section, and just really, just listen to the instructions. The oxygen mask came down. Everyone was kind of freaking out a little bit. Yeah.
What did you hear around you? Discussions, people praying? What were you hearing?
A lot of people trying to call their, their family. The woman next to me, asked me if I wanted to text anyone. And I was already on my phone trying to, get the word out to my family. And yeah, I mean, there's a lot of, chaos happening during that moment.
Did you think that you were going to die?
No, yeah, I tried to stay positive towards the whole thing. I just said,
good for you, because
yeah.
I'm not that person on the plane. So I'm hoping that I'm sitting next to you, because what were you saying to people to try to reassure them?
Well, the lady next to me was, just crying hysterically, and I just said, don't worry, it's going to work out. And as the plane was just going down, we literally just felt like we were just falling from the sky. And I looked to my left, and the engine's just totally done. And yeah, and I'm the one by the window seat, so the passenger next to me kept saying, like, what's going on out there? And as soon as I saw the runway, because I didn't know if we were going to land in a field, we had no idea where we were going to land. So as soon as I saw the runway, I turned to the passenger next to me. I said, we're good, don't worry.
You're a tough guy. You are a tough guy. So this engine pulled apart, and the debris flew behind you, right?
Yeah.
And went through this hole in the back of the plane. And we're hearing stories that people were trying to help that woman, that they were trying to help people that were here. Can you tell us anything about the way people were acting behind you around that part of the plane?
Sure, yeah. So during, while, the plane was falling, towards the back of the plane, a lot of people were yelling, does anyone have any medical training or anything? We need help back here. So I turned over my shoulder to look down, and there was a few people kind of trying to attend there to the person. And the flight attendants were very professional. They tried to keep everyone calm. And yeah, they were, the pilot, just it's unbelievable how she turned it around.
Was she talking to you all during
No,
this?
I didn't hear her at all. As soon as it started, as soon as the oxygen mask came down, I didn't hear her at all. They were just.
I mean, we're learning a little bit about her, as you just heard, and I just want to pull up her name again. I have it here on my phone. Tammy Jo Schultz, a former Navy fighter pilot and one of the first women to fly an F-15. It's an extraordinary story. When you got off, when the plane landed, what happened on that plane?
Man, when that landed, when it hit the ground, I felt like I hit the lottery. It was just an unbelievable feeling. Yeah.
So who did you call?
No, I was texting my mom kind of mid.
She's here in New York.
Yeah, she's here. I was texting her as, we're going down, and I was like,
Were you able to get a text message?
Yeah, as we were falling, the service kind of kept coming back, and I was trying to kind of pay for the Wi-Fi on my phone too, and that wasn't working. So I was just trying to get a message out there. Yeah.
Joe, thank goodness you're okay.
Thank you.
I'm sure you're going to have a nice reunion with your family, and you'll get to see your sister in Dallas soon, I hope.
Yes, definitely.
Would you be nervous about getting back on a plane?
No, these things never happen, so. Yeah.
You're amazing. Joe, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
It's great to have you with us tonight. Thank you. So here now with more, Mike Boyd of Boyd Group International, aviation analyst. Mike, Joe's story and the rest of the passengers had a good outcome tonight, but we did lose in this country the first person who's been killed in any aviation crash, commercial aviation crash, in almost 10 years.
It shows we have a very good safety record in the U.S. Remember, this is machinery, and there's over 13,000 of these engines right today turning and burning. And this is an event that it just happened, and I don't think it's indicative of safety at the airline industry. It's an indicative of machinery.
So what do you think happened? As Trace Gallagher showed us in his piece moments ago, there was a similar sort of breaking apart of an engine on the same kind of plane a couple years ago.
I think that's coincidental. I mean, there was another one with an airplane going into Hawaii last several months ago. Had the same kind of a thing. It wasn't uncontained like this one. But anything in that airplane, whether it's a shaft or a blade, even if you magnaflux them all the time, you can miss things, and that's just probably what happened here.
Apparently, the plane was inspected yesterday or the day before, I think. What does this tell us about that process?
Well, that process wouldn't have looked into the internals of the engine like that. That's a very, very complex process to do. But, Southwest has the best maintenance on the planet. Southwest is an extremely professional and safe airline. It's one of those things where machinery sometimes happen, but it's to both people in that cockpit, the lady and the captain, who got that airplane down, and she get a lot of kudos.
Yeah, that's my next and last question for you. How does it compromise your job to land the plane when you have one engine at 30,000 feet that has been destroyed?
It really, with the training that these pilots have at all U.S. carriers, this is what they're trained to do. This was not a big surprise of what do we do now. They knew exactly what to do, how to do it, and it shows because we had a safe landing.
What's your message in terms of aviation safety? Because, it does feel like these things used to happen on a fairly regular basis, when all of us were growing up. And now it does feel that they are so, thank God, few and far between. And we're grateful that most of these people were safe. And we're obviously, our thoughts are with those who are injured and this poor family who lost this woman.
Well, the airline industry is much safer than it was 20 years ago. It's going to be much safer in the future, but we're progressing. And if you want to travel, don't take the car, buy a ticket.
Good advice. Mike Boyd, thank you so much. Great to have you here tonight.
Thank you.
So also breaking this evening, a major California city joining more than a dozen others in a fight against the state's sanctuary law as California becomes more deeply divided, and there is momentum that is building on the side of being against these sanctuary cities. So we're going to talk about that. Plus, the DOJ says that it cannot release the leaked James Comey memos on his meetings with President Trump. Even though everybody feels like they've been out there, they will not release the actual text of these because they might contain some classified information. So does that cause a problem for James Comey? House Oversight Chairman Trey Gowdy joins me next.
I gave that unclassified memo to my friend and asked him to give it to a reporter. That is entirely appropriate.
They share one planter, and last season it was a flowering disaster. This year, they're not messing around. Miracle-Gro guarantees results. With rich potting mix that uses ingredients fresh from the forest and plant food that adds vital nutrition, so you'll have 3 times the blooms. They bask in their success.
Bank in Albuquerque, and obviously our thoughts are with them. What an awful, rough day for that family. And also this news, which is good news, the IRS giving you an extra day to file your taxes because they had a computer system outage. So if you had trouble getting them in, you've got a 24-hour reprieve to get that going. Also tonight, Congress will have a little bit longer to get their hands on James Comey's full memos about his meetings with President Trump. Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein asking for a little bit more time to finally turn them over to Chairman Nunes, Goodlatte, and Gowdy. You'll remember on Sunday, James Comey tried to explain why he had leaked the memos to a friend in the media rather than going through the proper channels.
I gave that unclassified memo to my friend and asked him to give it to a reporter. At the end of my driveway was a horde of media, and my thought was, if I give it to one reporter, then what's my answer to all the others about why I won't answer their question?
Interesting. So James Comey continues his book publicity tour, and he's hitting back at President Trump, who has lashed out at him for all of this. Watch.
The president says not only should you have been fired, but that you leaked classified information, lied to Congress under oath. For both of those infractions, he says you should go to jail.
Yeah, that is not normal. That is not okay. First of all, he's just making stuff up. But most importantly, the President of the United States is calling for the imprisonment of a private citizen, as he's done for a whole lot of people who criticize him. That is not acceptable in this country.
Moments ago, I spoke exclusively to House Oversight Chairman Trey Gowdy, who is fighting to get his hands on those memos and release them. You have been trying, obviously, to get these memos, as we said, and the letter that Rod Rosenstein wrote back to you about why he can't turn them over quite yet is here. Let's put it up on the screen for folks at home to see. He said one or more of the memos, he's referring to the letters that James Comey wrote, may be related to our ongoing investigation. It may contain classified information and may report confidential presidential communications, so we have a legal duty to evaluate the consequences of providing access to them. What do you think about that, given the fact that James Comey said there was nothing classified in those memos?
I wish he had shared that advice with Jim Comey before he went on national television and recalled every conversation he's ever had with President Trump. So I don't want the drama. I want the documents. I've actually read them, Martha. I read them months ago, which is why I think it's really important that you get to see them and your viewers get to see them. Look, Comey's talking about them. He included it in his Senate testimony. He's talking a lot about them. Well, everyone should know what exactly he memorialized after his conversations with the president.
And as you say, you're one of the few people who has actually read these memos. So is there anything classified in there? Is there anything top secret in there?
I can think of 2 sentences in all the memos I read that would be appropriately redacted. But having said that, DOJ can redact whatever they want that they think is part of an ongoing probe or somehow is classified. What I'm most interested in, which is what Comey's talking about, there's no need for that to be classified. So Comey gets to talk about it, but no one else does. And that's just not fair to your viewers, and it's not fair to the president, frankly.
All right. So when you take a look at some of what he has been saying with regard to all of this, let's play the soundbite from the interview where he gives his reasoning for why he did not convene a grand jury in the Hillary Clinton case.
And to those who say you should have brought Hillary Clinton before a grand jury?
We would prefer, with a subject of an investigation, to do an informal interview. A lot more flexibility there. They're still required to tell the truth.
Your thoughts?
He's right. You can't lie, but that would come as really interesting legal counsel to all the people who have been hauled in front of grand juries that the FBI really prefers to do it another way.
I'm sure they'd all prefer a more flexible venue that Hillary Clinton got.
Well, I'll tell you what they'd like. They'd love to have Cheryl Mills and all the other potential fact witnesses sitting in there while you're being interviewed. I have never heard of that before. So what he means by flexibility, I think the right word is unprecedented. It's never been done before.
Yeah, I mean, I would love for him to be pressed on that question of what exactly he means by flexibility and why it would get the FBI to their ends of determining whether or not there was any wrongdoing done in that case. I want to draw your attention to something else that came out on Friday in the Inspector General's report with regard to Andrew McCabe. And it goes to the question of whether or not James Comey is in any sort of trouble for leaking to his reporter friend, which he mentioned in the introduction here. And here is what it says in the IG report with regard to Andrew McCabe. It says McCabe argues that Comey, quote, would have every incentive to distance himself from this disclosure. It goes on to say, due to McCabe's belief that the OIG, the Inspector General, is reviewing Comey's disclosure of other information to the media. So Andrew McCabe apparently is under the impression that Comey is part of the Inspector General's investigation.
I wouldn't be surprised if he were. I mean, Michael Horowitz is looking at all of what happened in 2016, and there were lots of leaks. I mean, Comey gave one of his memos to a law professor. So I think Horowitz is looking at everything in 2016, and anyone at the Bureau who made an unauthorized leak should take note of what happened to Andy McCabe.
So is that potentially perilous for James Comey, who, as you point out, is telling his story? I think he's got 11 interviews coming up in the next 10 or 12 days.
I think what's most perilous for Jim Comey, quite frankly, Martha, is he's written a book about morality and ethics and truth, and he's engaged in more relativism, I think, than any book author I have seen in a long time. Now, keep in mind, he says President Trump lied. He's therefore unfit for office. But he's really proud of the fact that his wife and daughter supported the other candidate, who also has trouble with the truth. And then when it comes to Andy McCabe, he's a victim. So all three engage in the same conduct. One's unfit to be president, one he hopes is the president, and the other is his friend and a victim. That's relativism, so that is antithetical to ethics.
And he makes it very clear from the get-go that all of his decisions were made with the assumption that Hillary would win, that he framed his decisions in that pattern, which I can't understand why that was relevant to any of the work that he would have been doing. And it begs the question, how would he have done things differently if he thought the other outcome of President Trump was going to be the case, none of which should have any bearing on what he's doing. I want to ask you about the memo that Mark Meadows has sent to you, asking to clarify whether or not some of the newer revelations in these struck page text messages point to greater coordination than has been admitted between the FBI and the DOJ on what they were going to find with regard to Hillary Clinton.
Yeah, Mark's done great work, and so has Johnny Ratcliffe and others. I read Mark's letter. He shared it with me before it went public, which I appreciate him doing. I'm going to send it to the Inspector General. I'm going to send it to the Department and the FBI. To the extent that there is an allegation that false testimony was given, Congress is not the entity to investigate that. I think it fits most neatly within what Horowitz is doing now, which is looking at how unprecedented this investigation was in 2016.
Congressman Trey Gowdy, thank you very much. Always good to see you, sir. Have a good night.
Yes, ma'am. You too.
Our thanks to him. And now these live pictures of the Prime Minister of Japan and his wife, and President Trump and his wife. Let's listen in.
But we have had talks at the highest level, yes. And it's going very well, but we'll see what happens.
All right, thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Let's go, let's go. Make a way out. Thank you. We're leaving.
Quick spray at Mar-a-Lago as the meetings and now the dinner continues for the Prime Minister and his wife of Japan, as I said, and the First Lady and the President of the United States. Big crowd at Mar-a-Lago around the dinner table. We're going to continue to bring you the headlines out of that meeting as we get them. And still to come here tonight, UN inspectors are still trying to get to the site of the April 7th chemical attack in Syria. Karen Pierce is the relatively new UK ambassador to the United Nations. She's working very closely with Nikki Haley and is talking tough about next moves against Syria and Russia. She joins me next. And breaking news tonight from California, Justice Neil Gorsuch's role in a controversial new Supreme Court decision that may not actually be the way it's been portrayed today, and the major California city that has voted tonight against the sanctuary city law, San Diego. A huge vote there tonight. We'll be right back with that.
It's time to just chill, recognize the fact that they're here. Now, if Trump wants to round them up, you know, like some totalitarian government and ship them out, say that.
Gas, bloating, constipation, and diarrhea can start in the colon and may be signs of an imbalance of good bacteria. Only Philips Colon Health has this unique combination of probiotics. It helps replenish good bacteria. Get 4-in-1 symptom defense.
Whatever you do to stay healthy, you might be missing something. Your eyes. That's why there's Ocuvite. Ocuvite helps replenish nutrients your eyes can lose as
Fox News Chief National Correspondent Ed Henry, live in Washington tonight with the latest. Good evening, Ed.
Martha, great to see you. It could be a seismic shift because San Diego is just one of several jurisdictions in California now saying enough is enough to Democratic Governor Jerry Brown, who was here in Washington today facing pressure about the laws he's signed limiting the federal government's role in cracking down on illegal immigration. A big win today for President Trump. Breaking tonight, as you note, the San Diego Board of Supervisors voted 3-1 to support the president's lawsuit against California over several state laws that block the feds from doing more to enforce existing laws. Leaders in San Diego joining at least 9 cities in Orange County that have either voted to join the administration lawsuit or pass resolutions denouncing sanctuary policies. More remarkable, this follows a tiny city, Los Alamitos, becoming the first to pass an actual ordinance to declare itself legally exempt from the state laws on the grounds that they are unconstitutional. That was approved by a 4-to-1 vote by the city council there after a peaceful, but as you can see, noisy protest late Monday night. That puts the governor on defense, as the San Diego County supervisor says they're ready to file an amicus brief ASAP to support the president.
This was a carefully drawn statute that was radically changed from its original introduction. But no law is perfect. In some ways, these lawsuits will help clarify. I tried to carve a path down the middle to respect our immigrants, to respect our border, and to respect our law.
I want to show you the number of people who have weighed in, this thin stack, that support Governor Brown's actions on sanctuary state. Now I want to share with you something quite interesting. The number of people that have communicated with me in San Diego County, the people who do not support moving forward with Governor Brown's sanctuary state. This is really quite remarkable.
But the president suffered a loss today when the Supreme Court decided a provision of the law that makes it easier to deport immigrants convicted of a violent crime is too vague to be enforced. The president tweeted today's court decision means Congress must close loopholes that block the removal of dangerous criminal aliens, including aggravated felons. This is a public safety crisis that can only be fixed by Congress. The House and Senate must quickly pass a legislative fix to ensure violent criminal aliens can be removed from our society, keep America safe. Awkward because Justice Neil Gorsuch, nominated by the president to replace the late Antonin Scalia, sided with 4 liberal justices to tip the balance. Now, some on the left are claiming Gorsuch might now be a turncoat, but Gorsuch was actually following the conservative Scalia's philosophy that vagueness is a good reason to deem a law unconstitutional. By the way, Kristen Gaspar, that supervisor in San Diego, she's going to join me tonight for a first post-vote interview when I fill in for Shannon at 11 p.m., Martha.
Great. Well, we'll look forward to that. Thank you, Ed.
Good to see you.
You too. So joining me now, Tammy Bruce, president of Independent Women's Voice and Fox News contributor, and Jose Aristimuño, former national deputy press secretary for the Democratic National Committee and founder of Now Strategies, LLC. So first to the Gorsuch decision, because everybody jumped all over this today and said, you know, he's a turncoat, he's not backing up the president's feelings about the way things should be done in California. But Tammy, he is a textualist, and scholars, Supreme Court scholars look at this situation and say, you know what, Antonin Scalia probably would have said the same thing. He goes by the letter of the law.
Yeah, exactly. And this is not a bad idea. Look, when you've got legislation that is too vague, it's a good idea when it's got a very specific reason to be there to make it specific. It's an easy fix. In fact, even Justice Gorsuch suggested in his decision how that can be done, even if just specifying that the felony that is done is maybe requires a certain number of years that the person's been sentenced to is the reason why you can deport someone. But remember also, this is about legal immigrants. These are legal residents. It's not the criminal illegal aliens that the president is dealing with. Also, there's a belief that other laws can help facilitate this, but there's the removal of these individuals as well if need be. But there's no reason why Congress can't fix this quickly and do it properly. The law will be better for it as well.
Jose, you know, what do you make? We just watched the woman, like with the stack in San Diego of people that are against this sanctuary cities law. It's obvious when you watch Jerry Brown answering these questions that he realizes that there is a movement that is extremely powerful in California to build a wall, to remove illegal immigrants from your state.
Well, look, I can tell you this. A majority of Americans oppose a wall first and foremost. A majority of immigrants are actually law-abiding citizens. In terms of your question of sanctuary cities, I think sanctuary cities actually make our cities safer because they allow the undocumented community to speak with law enforcement, to actually grab the real criminals. And by the way, you know, we know on the Constitution, you know, policemen should not be acting as immigration officials. So we need sanctuary cities.
But these people, Jose, these people are saying that if you're here illegally, and that's a very important distinction, you just talked about immigrants. We're not talking about immigrants, we're talking about illegal immigrants that are in your state. What you're seeing, and this isn't me, this is people all across your state who are saying that they're fed up, that they've had enough, and that they want to get control back of their state.
No, and I totally understand that. The real solution to this, and we wouldn't even be debating sanctuary cities if President Trump took the leadership to pass comprehensive immigration reform. Because if we pass comprehensive immigration reform, we can actually legalize a majority of undocumented immigrants who are not criminals.
I haven't heard about comprehensive immigration reform.
If I could just add, if I may just add, the people who are victimized first by the gangs like MS-13 are the legal immigrant communities and the non-criminal illegal immigrants as well. Those are the people victimized.
Less than 10%.
Just remember that you're still victimizing the people you're reportedly supposed to be supporting. And
less than 10% of undocumented.
I'm sorry to cut you off, guys, but I got to go. We'll pick up the conversation another time. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So new reports that UN inspectors are being blocked from accessing the site of last week's chemical attacks in Syria. UK Ambassador to the UN, Karen Pierce, says Russia must respond. She joins me next live.
I think it's worth remembering that Russia helped pass the resolution that demanded that Syria give up its chemical weapons. So she now needs to deliver.
Insurance that won't replace the full value of your new car? You're better off throwing your money right into the harbor. Gonna regret that.
With new car replacement, if your brand new car gets totaled, Liberty Mutual will pay the entire value plus depreciation. Liberty stands with you. Liberty Mutual Insurance.
Palm Wonderful Pure Pomegranate Juice is loaded with antioxidants. Fiercely focused, free radical annihilating antioxidants.
Clan of lovely family members. There's some images of Barbara Bush this evening. We reported to you earlier this week that she had made the determination that she wanted to stop treatment and that she would receive comfort care. Here's a look back at the life of Barbara Bush.
Barbara Pierce Bush developed a love for language early in her life. As the daughter of a career magazine publisher, her mother and father read to her beginning the day she was born, on June 8, 1925, in Queens, New York. She met George Herbert Walker Bush at a Christmas dance when she was 16.
I don't know anyone funnier than he is.
They were engaged within a year and a half and married in 1945 when George returned home from the war. The couple moved more than 24 times during their marriage. They settled in Midland, Texas in 1950, where George built a business in the oil industry. Barbara raised their 5 children, George, Jeb, Neil, Marvin, and Dorothy. Little Robin died from leukemia just before her 4th birthday.
If you have 5 children, all 5 are very, very different. But in our case, all 5 are very close. Very close. I mean, it's wonderful, and it makes George and me, my husband and I, feel just great that they love each other so much.
The family moved to Houston in 1959, and 5 years later, Barbara began the first of a lifetime of political campaigns. George lost his Senate bid then, but was elected to Congress in 1966. He was named ambassador to the United Nations in 1971, then served as chairman of the Republican National Committee, chief liaison to China, and director of the CIA by 1976. Her return to Washington during this time was said to be very difficult, and Barbara suffered from depression. George was elected vice president, serving under Ronald Reagan in 1980. Neil's diagnosis as dyslexic many years before had renewed Barbara's interest in language and reading skills, and she made it her platform as second lady to confront both child and adult literacy.
I decided that I wanted to do something that would help George, that would help the most Americans possible without costing the government huge amounts of money.
She became the first candidate spouse to address the National Convention when her husband was nominated for president in 1988. Barbara was a key asset to the campaign. Appearing in ads emphasizing her domestic and motherly roles, she had a reputation for being outspoken and was said to be actively involved in campaign strategy. But for the most part, she kept out of political discussions and controversies. As First Lady, Barbara remained committed to bettering the literacy rate, which she called the most important issue America had, and founded the Barbara Bush Foundation for Family Literacy. She also made countless appearances on national radio programs, stressing the importance of reading aloud to children, and wrote a few children's books. She was a strong advocate of volunteerism and worked to eradicate homelessness and the spread of AIDS. Some say she took the loss of her husband's 1992 re-election bid to Bill Clinton personally, but she dove back into public service, supporting the Leukemia Society, the Boys and Girls Club, the Ronald McDonald House, and many more.
I loved reliving the most exciting life you've ever known. I mean, it really is.
Barbara Bush saw two of her sons, Jeb and George W., become two-term governors of Florida and Texas. And George W. became the first president since John Quincy Adams to follow his father to the White House. Barbara got to see her son's presidential library and museum open in Dallas in 2013, a historic moment with all 5 living presidents and first ladies sharing one stage. Around that time, there were rumors of her son Jeb making a run at president, and his mom famously said in the press, "We've had enough Bushes in the White House." She later switched her position, saying while she was initially hesitant of the idea, she changed her mind because, quote, "Our problems are so profound that America needs a leader who can renew the promise of this great nation." With his mom's blessing, Jeb announced his candidacy for president in 2015. In her later years, Mrs. Bush suffered from a handful of health problems and hospitalizations. Looking back at her extraordinary life, few first ladies have been embraced by the American people like Barbara Pierce Bush, the matriarch of a modern-day political dynasty.
George Bush has really brought to my life the most exciting times. George has made my life sing.
It is that love story that many will remember them for. George and Barbara were devoted to each other in marriage for over 73 years.
Actually, he kissed me in public. It wasn't even dramatic, exciting, but I almost fainted. I was so excited.
And that was it?
That was it, for me.
That's the guy.
Mm-hmm. And still.
Yeah.
I just can't tell you how much I love him.
In Washington, Brett Baer, Fox News.
Barbara Pierce Bush, and we will pause now for our Fox affiliates around the country to join us in just a moment. Stand by. Breaking news from Fox News headquarters in New York. Barbara Pierce Bush, the First Lady of the United States, wife to President George H.W. Bush and mother to President George W. Bush, has passed away at the age of 92. She was a beloved First Lady who was a champion of literacy. She was a fierce advocate for her huge clan, political and otherwise, that has extended into so many areas of American life. It was announced just a couple of days ago that she would forego further treatment and that she wished to receive comfort care in her home, surrounded by her family and her loved ones, and that is exactly what she did. She and her beloved husband have been married for 73 years. They are one of the great American political love stories of our time. She said he was the only man she'd ever kissed, and that she married him, fell in love with him, and married him shortly thereafter. She obviously, the family received a large outpouring of affection and prayers and thoughts that have been with the family throughout the last several days. And now tonight, the sad news that she has indeed passed away. I am joined here, the ambassador to the United Kingdom, who was joining me for other reasons this evening. We now, of course, turn our attention to the death of of the former First Lady, UK Ambassador Karen Pierce. Good to have you with us tonight. You say that you met Barbara Bush.
Yes, I had the very great pleasure of meeting her in Washington with President Bush. They had been neighbours of the British Embassy when he was Vice President. He was a great friend to Britain, and I hope we were very good friends to them. We really enjoyed meeting them. You spoke about the affection for her. She was a wonderful lady. I think that affection was shared in Britain and by the British people. And if I may say so, on behalf of the British government and the British people, we send our condolences to our American friends and to Barbara Bush's family at this time.
It's quite extraordinary. I mean, obviously, think about the relationship the United States and the United Kingdom have, the closest of allies. And this is a family that has produced 2 American presidents that have had close relationships with the United Kingdom. We saw in some of the images a moment ago, Barbara Bush with Princess Diana. Obviously, many, many visits, both business and diplomatic and otherwise, to your country.
I think that's absolutely right, and we've always been very pleased to see them. President Bush, Mrs. Bush got on very well with successive British leaders. I remember their sense of humour particularly. They once came to a play, performed at the British Embassy, a family event, which was very nice to see them. And President Bush would actually make his own telephone calls. He would ring the British Embassy and ask for Mrs. Thatcher by name. He'd say Margaret. A lot of us took a long time to realise who exactly he meant.
It's wonderful to have you here tonight. I hope you'll come back so we can discuss world issues further. And tonight we have obviously turned our attention to Barbara Bush. And joining me now, Chris Wallace, host of Fox News Sunday. Chris, good evening to you. Obviously sad news. Everyone just registering this loss.
No, it is very sad news, and good evening, Martha. First of all, you have to put Barbara Bush in historical context because she shares something with Abigail Adams, she was the only other woman who was both the First Lady, the wife of the President, and the mother of a President. Pretty august company, Barbara Bush and Abigail Adams. And then also the extraordinary love affair between George H.W., Bush 41, and Barbara Bush. She met him when she was 16 years old. She was in boarding school. They waited. He went off to war. They married. I guess you look at the age. She was 20 years old at the time. They were married for 72 years. He had just come back from World War II, where I think he was the youngest Navy pilot to enlist in the Navy during World War II. And they had this extraordinary relationship, the longest marriage of any first couple in American history. And to give you a sense of her flavor, I was with her a number of times. The family called her the Silver Fox. They called her the Enforcer. She was tough. She ran the family, and I think that Bush 41 would acknowledge that because he was off pursuing his career, first in the oil business, then in national politics. But she ran the family and was the enforcer in terms of discipline and what was allowed and what wasn't allowed. And it went on not only for her children, but also for her grandchildren. You didn't mess with Barbara Bush.
No.
Well, I mean, there was even the story, I remember when the president was president, Bush 41 was president, and he announced defiantly that he didn't like broccoli and he wasn't going to eat broccoli, and that was it. He was now the president. He wasn't going to put up with it anymore. And there was, of course, a huge outcry from the broccoli growers of America. And Barbara Bush agreed to have a huge truck of broccoli driven up to the White House, where she greeted it to say, well, maybe the president wasn't going to eat broccoli, but she was, and all Americans should eat broccoli.
We're just looking at pictures from one of the conventions, and I remember covering the convention here in New York for George W. Bush and seeing Barbara Bush and President Bush 41 there, just beaming ear to ear. They were so proud of their son. And as Brett reported in the piece that we just showed, when President Bush 41 lost to Bill Clinton for that second term, he didn't want to be a one-termer, as we all remember, that she took that loss hard. And then to see her son, the former governor of Texas, take on that role, obviously, it was just an enormous source of pride for the two of them. And I just remember so clearly looking at their faces. I was standing right near them and just thinking about what an amazing historical moment that was, Chris.
Absolutely. And, of course, Bush 43 did get reelected, was a two-term president, and I think there was some feeling of vindication inside the Bush family. No, look, you mentioned earlier, or maybe it was Brett that did, that when there was talk early on in this last campaign about Jeb Bush, George Bush 43's younger brother, running for president, she said, I think there have been enough Bushes.
Right.
But when the Bush family decided and Jeb decided, no, I want to run, of course, she was out there, well, I'm thinking it was 2 years ago. She was probably 90 years old, and she was out campaigning for him in the primaries as a dutiful mother would, because she was very deeply loyal to her son.
I mean, you think about the great political dynasties in American history, and you think about the Kennedys, you think about the Bushes, that just had such extending tentacles. George P. is in office, holds a state office in Texas, and to have a son who's also was the governor of Florida, as you point out, Jeb Bush, who also ran for president, is an extraordinary legacy. Chris, if you could stand by, I'm going to bring in Dana Perino, host of the Daily Briefing and former White House press secretary. Dana, I know you're very close to the family, and that this is deeply felt for you, I'm sure.
It is. Thank you for having me on, Martha. And of course, all of that you've said so far has been in such tribute to her. And George W. Bush has just released a statement as well about the passing of his mother. And one of the things he said is that Barbara Bush was a fabulous First Lady and a woman unlike any other who brought levity, love, and literacy to millions, and to us she was so much more.
All right, I'm sorry, I couldn't hear the last thing that you were just saying, Dana. We're just getting a lot of different communications coming in here, and these images of the Jeb Bush campaign as they walked through the crowd there. And, she was just an amazing, she was a ball of energy, Dana.
Absolutely, and President George W. Bush says she certainly kept us on our toes and kept us laughing until the end. She really lived a life that was of such great consequence, but she didn't plan any of it. And to whom much is given, much is required. I remember, Martha, at a mentoring event that I invited her to, she had said, well, why would you want me? I've never worked a day in my life. And the truth is that she never earned a paycheck. Right. Everything she did for charity and in honor of public service, which is really remarkable and something she passed on to her entire family.
And Dan, I just want to read, we've just received a statement from President George W. Bush on the passing of his mother, and I'll read it now. My dear mother has passed on at age 92. Laura, Barbara, Jenna, and I are sad, but our souls are settled because we know hers was. Barbara Bush was a fabulous First Lady and a woman unlike any other who brought levity, love, and literacy to millions. To us, she was so much more. Mom kept us on our toes and kept us laughing until the end. I'm a lucky man that Barbara Bush was my mother. Our family will miss her dearly, and we thank you all for your prayers and good wishes. Dana.
Well, it is interesting to think about her not only as the wife of a president, but the mother who helped raise two well-known leaders in George W. Bush and in Jeb Bush. But that feeling of public service, that commitment and dedication to helping others, was something that she required of all of her family. And one of the things I think that people can imagine is behind the scenes, when the family was just together and there were no cameras rolling, they were really like all families, making fun of each other. But I will tell you one thing about Barbara Bush. You did not want to disappoint her. And that was true of us as staffers as well. And I think that's true of 41's White House. But certainly when we were working for George W. Bush, you always wanted to make her proud. And that's quite a wonderful leadership quality to have and to pass on to others as well.
It absolutely is, and I think it's one of the strongest things that any parent seeks, to have that quality where, your children don't want to disappoint you, but they love you. She had that wonderful combination of love and strength and expectations for her family, which they lived up to in an enormous way. Dana, thank you so much for being with us this evening as we watch Barbara Bush and her husband, the president, in a scene and a moment when they were boarding Marine One. We all remember Barbara Pierce Bush this evening, dead at the age of 92. Stay tuned for continuing Fox News coverage of this story throughout the evening. Now I am rejoined back here on Fox News Channel by Brett Baer, who narrated that lovely piece that we just watched on Barbara Bush, the host, of course, of Special Report. Brett, good evening to you. Your thoughts?
Well, you know, it's a sad day, and obviously one that the family saw coming, but you see from the statements coming out and the warmth and wit that exuded from Barbara Bush and really everything. And she was all about family. And in her final moments, to be surrounded by family, talking and being at home had to be an amazing thing for that expanded family. You know, she was always someone who connected, especially women connected with Barbara Bush. When she came into the White House in 1989, Martha, she openly joked about the contrast with her thinner predecessor, Nancy Reagan, and more fashionable, she would say, saying, quote, "My mail tells me that a lot of fat, white-haired, wrinkled ladies are tickled pink." And, you know, she just had that wit about her that was kind of exuded this sunshine that wherever she went. I last talked to her about a year ago up in Maine, and she was just the matriarch, and everybody flocked to her.
Yeah, and I always, you know, I think it's such a special story that her hair turned gray when she was a young woman, when she lost her daughter, Robin, and she never colored it. She left it that way as almost a memory tribute, perhaps, to her child, and she was just an enormously strong woman. We have in the statement that was just put out by President Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton as well, Barbara Bush was a remarkable woman. She had grit and grace, brains and beauty. She was fierce and feisty in support of her family and friends, her country and her causes. She showed us what an honest, vibrant, full life looks like. Hillary and I mourn her passing, and we bless her memory. Goes on to say, we will never forget the courtesy and kindness that she and President Bush showed us. Starting when I was governor in 1983, I'll always treasure my summer visits to Kennebunkport. Barbara joked that George and I spent so much time together, I almost became a member of the family, the black sheep that had gone astray. So obviously, Brett, as we continue to get all of these statements coming in from leaders around the world, I mean, obviously she is a person who was on the world stage for so many years, and we watch and reminisce these beautiful pictures. Brett, thank you very much for being with us tonight. Continued coverage, obviously, of this throughout the evening, and we will continue to talk about the life and the legacy of an extraordinary woman, wife and mother to two United States presidents, Barbara Bush.